The sea around Antikythera is not gentle, it is restless, a dark blue stretch of Aegean water that curls and crashes between the rugged Greek islands of Crete and Kythera. In fair weather it is dazzling, sun glinting off the swells, gulls wheeling overhead, the air heavy with salt. But beneath that bright surface lies a silence that holds secrets older than empires. It was the spring of 1900 when a small group of sponge divers, hardened men from the island of Simi, found themselves caught in a storm. Their ship, the Simi, had drifted off course, hugging the cliffs of Antikythera to avoid the worst of the waves. These men were no strangers to risk. The sponge trade demanded brutal labour. They wore heavy canvas suits, weighted boots, and a massive brass helmet fed by a hand-cranked air pump. With this crude diving gear, they walked across the seabed like slow, burdened ghosts, harvesting the soft, living sponges that clung to the rocks. But on that day, when the seas calmed just enough for them to work, they stumbled into a different world. The diver, Elias Stadiatis, made the first descent, lowered through the gloom, bubbles streaming past his helmet. The light faded, the pressure clawed at his chest. He touched down on the seabed at 45 metres, deeper than most men dared, and there, in that dim underwater twilight, he froze. Before him lay not rocks, not sponges, but a tangle of broken timbers, bronze statues, amphorae, the shattered bones of an ancient shipwreck. Statues stared at him with blank, encrusted eyes, marble bodies half buried in sand, their faces obscured by centuries of marine growth. Bronze horses lay twisted and green with corrosion, as if drowned in mid-gallop. The seabed was littered with amphorae, jars once filled with wine and oil, now lying silent and shattered. Elias tugged frantically on his lifeline. When he surfaced, staggering back onto the deck, his face was pale. He muttered of dead bodies on the seafloor, so lifelike were the statues that he thought he had stumbled into an underwater graveyard. The captain and crew stared at him. Had the pressure driven him half mad? But curiosity burned stronger than fear. Soon another diver descended, and then another. The truth could not be denied. They had found something extraordinary. The Greek authorities were alerted. Within weeks, the small sponge boat had become the centre of a government-sponsored salvage operation. Athens sent archaeologists, naval officers, and crates of supplies. For the first time in history, an ancient shipwreck would be systematically recovered from the depths of the sea. The year was 1900. Think of the context. Europe was racing into a new century of machines and empires. Archaeology was transforming from treasure hunting into science. Yet the tools available to these divers were still medieval in their brutality. The suits were heavy, ungainly, and unforgiving. At those depths, a single slip of the air hose meant death. The bends, decompression sickness, was poorly understood, yet it claimed the lives and health of several divers during this excavation. Still, they persevered. Day after day, men descended into the gloom. They tied ropes around statues and amphorae. They wrestled bronze limbs from the sand. They rose gasping to the surface, hauling up treasures unseen for 2,000 years. By the summer of 1901, the recovered cargo filled the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. Bronze statues, marble torsos, jewellery, coins, glassware. It was a spectacular haul, a snapshot of the Hellenistic world preserved by catastrophe. And among these treasures lay something almost overlooked. A corroded lump of bronze and wood, about the size of a shoebox, broken into fragments, the surface eaten away by centuries of salt. At first glance, it was nothing compared to the gleaming statues or intricate jewellery. Just another artifact, noted and set aside. But inside that corroded mass, history's greatest enigma waited. It was a Greek archaeologist, Valerios Stais, who noticed it first. In May 1902, as he examined the artifacts under museum light, he saw something astonishing. Embedded within the bronze mass was a gear with teeth precisely cut. Stais leaned closer. He turned the fragment over in his hands. More gears, wheels within wheels. This was no statue, no ornament. This was a mechanism. His colleagues were sceptical. The notion seemed absurd. A device of cogs and gears from the ancient world? Impossible. Gears belonged to clocks and machines of the Renaissance, not to Greece 2,000 years earlier. And yet there it was. Picture the room. Wooden floors creaking underfoot. Dust motes drifting in shafts of sunlight. Curators and scholars gathered around the fragment, arguing, doubting. One insisted it was modern contamination, perhaps a clock part mixed with the wreck. Another shook his head. The corrosion was ancient, the patina unmistakable. Still, the implications were almost unthinkable. If genuine, this would rewrite everything known about ancient science and technology. The fragments, there were dozens in total, were catalogued and stored. They became a curiosity in the museum's collection. Scholars speculated. A few wrote tentative papers, but the world moved on. The statues drew the crowds. The bronze athlete, the marble philosophers, the glittering jewellery. These captured the imagination. The broken gears. They were too strange, too alien to fit comfortably into the story of the ancient world. And so, for decades, the Antikythera Mechanism sat largely ignored. Let us step back for a moment to imagine the world that made it. It is the 2nd century BCE. Greece is no longer the empire of Alexander, but a patchwork of kingdoms and city-states, overshadowed by the rising power of Rome. Yet in the intellectual centres, Rhodes, Alexandria, Pergamon, scholars still push the boundaries of mathematics, astronomy, and mechanics. Hipparchus, the great astronomer, charts the heavens with unmatched precision. Archimedes, in earlier generations, has already astonished the world with inventions and mathematical brilliance. Workshops produce delicate armillary spheres, sundials, astrolabes, and somewhere, perhaps in Rhodes, perhaps in another forgotten workshop of genius, craftsmen build something unprecedented. A device that can predict the motions of the sun, the moon, and perhaps even the planets. A device that encodes the cycles of eclipses, calendars, and festivals. A device of bronze gears and dials that, in every sense but electricity, functions like a computer. This is what lay, corroded and silent, in the storerooms of Athens. But in 1901, no one yet understood it. The divers had nearly died to bring it to the surface. The scholars had nearly dismissed it as nonsense. And still, the fragments waited. Imagine their silence. The gears, once turning with purpose, now frozen in rust. The inscriptions, once clear, now eaten away to faint scratches. Knowledge, once alive, buried beneath centuries of neglect. And yet, the mystery endured. The fragments waited. Through wars, through occupations, through the changing fortunes of Greece itself, they sat quietly in their cases in the National Archaeological Museum. Visitors barely glanced at them, corroded lumps, unrecognizable, overshadowed by gleaming statues and marble heroes. But in the middle of the 20th century, something stirred. A British science historian, Derek de Solla Price, walked the echoing halls of the museum in Athens. He was a man fascinated by the history of instruments, clocks, and astronomy. And when he saw the Antikythera fragments, he felt the hair rise on his arms. These were not chance shapes, he realized. They were purposeful. He saw the gears, the tooth counts, the faint traces of inscriptions. To him it was as though a mechanical ghost whispered from across millennia. Price would devote much of his career to this enigma. He called it like finding a jet engine in the tomb of Tutankhamun. The key was technology. In the 1950s, radiography, X-ray imaging, was becoming practical for delicate artifacts. Price and his Greek collaborator, Charalambos Karakalos, arranged to have the fragments examined. The X-rays revealed what no eye could see. Inside those corroded lumps were teeth upon teeth, finely cut, interlocking gears. Wheels of different sizes, meshing together in a dance of mathematics. Some wheels had 30 teeth, others 60, some 90. Ratios, cycles, patterns. Price was stunned. He painstakingly catalogued each fragment, each visible tooth. He reconstructed gear trains on paper, imagining how the device might have worked. His 1974 monograph, Gears from the Greeks, was a bombshell. Price argued that the mechanism could predict the motions of the sun and moon, including eclipses, based on known astronomical cycles. He showed that the gearing ratios matched the 19-year Metonic cycle, 235 lunar months, bringing sun and moon back into harmony. The ancient Greeks, he suggested, had built a mechanical model of the heavens. Picture the impact. Historians of science had long assumed that precision gearing did not exist before the Middle Ages. The Antikythera Mechanism smashed that assumption. It revealed an ancient technological sophistication that had been lost, forgotten, erased by time. And yet Price's work was only the beginning. For all his brilliance, he was still limited. The X-rays were crude by modern standards. Many fragments remained opaque, their secrets hidden inside. The inscriptions, faint scratches of Greek letters, were barely legible. There were gaps, gears missing, dials half gone. His model was elegant but incomplete. The mystery remained, and decades passed. By the early 2000s, technology had leapt forward once more. High-resolution CT scanning, 3D imaging, digital modelling, all tools unthinkable in Price's day. A new team assembled, the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project. Led by Greek and international scholars, it brought together archaeologists, physicists, computer scientists, epigraphers. Their mission was simple: see inside the fragments as no one had before. The machine whirred. The CT scanner sliced the bronze open, not physically but virtually. Layer after layer, the images unfolded on screens in staggering clarity. And there, revealed in ghostly light, were the gears. 37 known wheels, interlocked with astonishing precision. Inscriptions once invisible now emerged. Lines of ancient Greek, cut into the metal. Instructions, labels, a manual for use. The fragments, silent for 2,000 years, spoke again. What they revealed was nothing short of breathtaking. The mechanism had two main faces. On the front, a large circular dial marked with the zodiac, another with the Egyptian calendar of 365 days. Small pointers indicated the positions of the sun and moon. A tiny ball, half black, half white, rotated to show the phases of the moon, waxing and waning across the month. On the back were two great spirals. The upper spiral tracked the 19-year Metonic cycle, essential for reconciling lunar and solar calendars. The lower spiral marked the Saros cycle, about 18 years long, which predicted eclipses. Small subsidiary dials tracked the Calippic cycle of 76 years, the Exoligmos of 54 years. There was even a dial for the 4-year cycle of the Pan-Hellenic Games, including the Olympic Games themselves. Turn a handle on the side, and the gears would turn. The dials would advance. The heavens would move across the face of the machine. Past and future alike could be calculated, predicted, understood. This was not just a calculator. It was a mechanical cosmos. Pause for a moment. Imagine it. In some Hellenistic workshop, a craftsman bends over a workbench. The room smells of oil and bronze shavings. Shafts of sunlight fall through the shutters. On the table lies the mechanism, gleaming, precise, complete. He fits the final gear. He tests the crank. The machine hums with motion. The dials turn. The tiny moon sphere rotates from light to dark. The inscriptions gleam, telling the user what each dial shows, and in that moment the heavens themselves seem to move within his hands. What did he feel? Pride. Awe. A sense of touching the divine. The Antikythera Mechanism was not just science. It was philosophy made metal. It was the Greek conviction that the cosmos was ordered, rational, comprehensible, and that man could model it. Back in the 21st century, scholars gasped at the implications. The gearwork was more advanced than anything seen until the great astronomical clocks of medieval Europe over 1,000 years later. The miniaturization was exquisite, teeth cut barely over a millimetre wide. The designers had mastered epicyclic gearing, wheels within wheels that could model the irregular motion of the moon. The lunar anomaly, as Hipparchus described, was built into bronze itself. This was supposed to be impossible, and yet it existed. Questions multiplied. Who built it? Some suspected a connection to Rhodes, where astronomers like Hipparchus and later Posidonius worked. Others pointed to Alexandria, with its vast libraries and scholars. Could it have been inspired by Archimedes? The Romans spoke of devices he built that modelled the heavens. Cicero himself once described seeing such a sphere. And why was it on that ship? The wreck carried luxury goods, statues, glass, jewellery, the cargo of a wealthy patron, perhaps bound for Rome. Was the mechanism a commission for a nobleman, a teaching tool for scholars, a navigational aid, though it seems too delicate for the rough life of the sea? Each theory opened doors, but none answered all. The truth of its origin remained elusive, veiled like the stars behind cloud. Yet the mystery is not only historical, it is human. Imagine being one of the divers in 1901, hauling up statues, unaware that in your hands lay the key to an ancient cosmos. Imagine being Valerio Stiles, staring at a gear where no gear should exist. Imagine Derek de Sola Price, sleepless in his study, gears and ratios scribbled across his desk, whispering, "This changes everything." And imagine the modern scientists watching the CT images unfurl on their screens, seeing at last the innards of a machine 2,000 years older than any like it. The awe is the same across generations, a bridge of wonder linking divers, archaeologists, historians, and eus today. But with awe came unease. If the Greeks could build this, what else might they have created? How much knowledge was lost, scattered like sand by the tides of empire and war? Because after the mechanism, there is silence. No other device like it survives from the ancient world. No continuous tradition of geared computing endured. For 1,000 years, humanity forgot. The medieval clocks of Europe would rediscover such gearing only in the 14th century. The leap that the mechanism represented lay dormant, buried beneath ignorance and time. It is a reminder of how fragile knowledge is, how easily brilliance can be lost, and how the sea, in its indifference, can sometimes preserve what the land destroys. The Antikythera Mechanism is many things. It is a machine, a timepiece, an astronomical computer, a work of art. But above all, it is a story of discovery, of loss, of rediscovery. A story that asks us to rethink what we thought we knew about the ancient world. And it is a story still unfolding, for even now the fragments do not give up all their secrets. Scholars still debate whether the mechanism modelled the planets as well as the sun and moon. Some fragments hint at additional gearing, now lost. The inscriptions, though clearer, remain partly obscure. Every new scan, every new reconstruction adds to the picture, but also reminds us how incomplete it still is. In the halls of the Athens Museum, the fragments sit behind glass, small, green, corroded, unassuming. Visitors pass by. Some linger, peering at the delicate gears visible within. Others move on, drawn to the statues, the gold, the splendour. But for those who know, for those who understand, the mechanism is more wondrous than any jewel, because it is not just a relic. It is a voice from the ancient world, whispering across 2,000 years. We understood more than you think. We built more than you believe. We dreamed of the cosmos, and we captured it in bronze. The fragments remain silent, yet they demand answers. For over a century now, scholars and dreamers have wrestled with the enigma of the Antikythera Mechanism. The deeper the research goes, the more astonishing and unsettling the implications become. Because this was not a crude experiment, this was mastery. The gearing ratios are exact, the epicyclic systems precise, the inscriptions elegant and informative. Whoever built this was working at the peak of a tradition that somehow vanished. In the 21st century, reconstructions have brought the mechanism back to life. Imagine standing in a quiet workshop, watching a faithful replica tick into motion. A hand turns the crank, the gears engage, and slowly, almost reverently, the dials advance. On the front, the sun pointer glides across the zodiac. The moon's little black and white sphere rotates, slipping from crescent to half, to full, and back again. On the back, the spirals advance, marking years, decades, cycles of eclipses. The inscriptions guide the eye, when the shadow will fall, when the next great festival will arrive. It is hypnotic, beautiful, mechanical poetry, and it makes the question burn even brighter. Who first dreamed this? Some scholars argue that Hipparchus of Rhodes must have had a hand in it. His astronomical tables fit the gearing. His obsession with lunar anomalies seems carved into its very bronze. Others whisper of Archimedes, whose devices were spoken of in awe by Roman generals, machines that could mirror the heavens. Still others suggest anonymous craftsmen, men whose names history has lost, but whose genius survives in this single corroded fragment. The truth may never be known, but perhaps that is part of the power. The mechanism is not about one name, one genius. It is about a civilization that dared to model the cosmos, a culture that believed the universe could be measured, predicted, understood, and built a machine to prove it. And yet, what haunts us most is the silence that followed. Why did such devices not flourish? Why do we not find workshops filled with gears and models? Why did the tradition not spread across the Mediterranean? The answers lie, perhaps, in history's brutal tides. The Roman conquest, the burning of libraries, the death of scholars, the fragile thread of knowledge, snapped again and again by war, by neglect, by the indifference of power. The Antikythera Mechanism is the survivor, not of a storm alone, but of centuries of forgetfulness, a single voice where there was once a choir. Consider what might have been if such technology had endured, if the tradition of mechanical computing had survived. How different might the world have been? Could Europe have had mechanical clocks 1,000 years earlier? Could the Renaissance have come in the Roman age? Could the Industrial Revolution have dawned not in the 18th century, but in the 3rd? We cannot know. And perhaps that is the cruelest gift of the mechanism. Not only what it is, but what it hints we lost. And yet it was not wholly lost, because in 1900 a storm drove sponge divers to Antikythera, because Elias Stadiatis, gasping in his suit, stumbled on statues staring from the deep, because Valeria Stais had the curiosity to peer closer at a corroded lump, because Derek de Solla Price refused to accept the impossible, because modern scientists turned beams of light into windows through bronze. Because of all this, the mechanism speaks again. It reminds us that history is never finished, that knowledge can lie hidden in a wreck, a ruin, a forgotten manuscript, that sometimes the past is not behind us at all. It waits quietly for us to rediscover it. The Antikythera Mechanism is a relic of brilliance, a survivor of tragedy, a reminder that the past is never as simple as we think. It is proof that human imagination, fragile, fleeting, fallible, can also be astonishing, that across centuries, across silence, across rust and ruin, a single device can still whisper, "We were capable of more than you know." Thank you for listening to Fireside History. If this story moved you, please like, comment and subscribe. Your support helps keep the fire burning.